Close your eyes and imagine you are standing in the heart of Tehran on an August afternoon in 1953, where the dry heat of the Middle East comes not only from the scorching sun but also rises from the anger of tens of thousands of people screaming in the streets. The smell of melting asphalt mingles with the scent of gunpowder and a thick fragrance, more powerful than anything else in this world, the smell of oil. Does a nation truly own what lies deep beneath its soil? Or is national sovereignty actually just a fragile illusion that vanishes as soon as it touches the interests of great powers? That question is not just for the past, it is the heartbeat of one of the darkest conspiracies of the 20th century. In 1953, the two most powerful intelligence agencies in the world, the American CIA and the British MI6, executed a name-changing mission for an entire government, not through grand expeditionary forces, but with suitcases of cash, sophisticated fake news campaigns, and code names whispered in the dark. Welcome to the world of Operation Ajax, a pivotal moment when intelligence cards proved the grim truth, that oil is sometimes more precious than blood and justice, and a young democracy can be crushed simply by pragmatic economic interests. This story actually began long before American spies set foot in Tehran. It originated from the pitch-black oil wells in Abadan, where the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the predecessor of today's giant BP Corporation, held nearly absolute extraction privileges for many decades. Imagine an extremely unjust reality: while shareholders in London reaped enormous profits to build an empire, the Iranian workers, the true owners of that land, had to live in muddy slums, without electricity or clean water, receiving only breadcrumbs from the colonial banquet table. That inequality was like a powder keg waiting for a spark, and that spark was Mohammad Mosaddegh. He was not a radical rebel, but an elected politician with an austere appearance, a man who often appeared in simple pajamas even when receiving international guests to demonstrate integrity and closeness to the people. When Mosaddegh was elected prime minister in 1951, he performed an act that shook the Western world, nationalizing the Iranian oil industry. To Mosaddegh, it was reclaiming justice, but to London, it was a blatant daylight robbery aimed at the economic lifeblood of the British Empire. The British were outraged. They immediately implemented naval blockades and fierce economic sanctions, sending Iranian finances into a crisis spiral, yet Mosaddegh did not back down. He stood in the square and declared that it is better to die in freedom than to live in the servitude of black gold. Realizing they could not overthrow this stubborn old man on their own through diplomacy or international courts, the British turned to a more influential ally, the United States. Initially, President Harry Truman showed hesitation. He saw in Mosaddegh the silhouette of a true nationalist. However, when Dwight D. Eisenhower entered the White House along with an obsession over the communist ghost during the Cold War era, the script changed completely. British diplomats were very clever. They did not talk about oil profits with the Americans, they spoke of the Soviet threat. They convinced Washington that if Mosaddegh remained in power, Iran would fall into the hands of the today Communist Party and become a pawn for Moscow. The fear of losing a strategic outpost in the Middle East made America nod in agreement. And so, Operation Ajax was officially approved under the direction of an ambitious figure, Kermit Roosevelt Jr., grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt. Kermit slipped into Tehran not with an army, but with a fake name and suitcases filled with US dollar bills. The game in the shadows began with sophisticated fake news cards. The CIA spent money to bribe almost all large and small local newspapers in Tehran, turning them into loudspeakers to smear the prime minister. Every morning, the Iranian people woke up to read articles describing Mosaddegh as a mad dictator, a traitor to the Islamic faith, or worse, a puppet of the Soviet Union. Suspicion began to take root in the public heart. Simultaneously, Kermit Roosevelt executed a more cruel move. He hired street thugs, wrestlers, and even petty thieves, paying them to pose as Mosaddegh supporters while vandalizing temples and attacking citizens' shops. The purpose of this was to terrify the clergy and the middle class, making them believe that Mossadegh's administration was leading the country into chaos and anarchy. In a country where faith and stability are the foundations like Iran, this strike was more painful and effective than any bomb. The most important knot of the conspiracy was the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. At that time, the Shah was a young king, timid and always fearful of his position. Under terrible pressure and promises from Western agents, the Shah finally signed the decree to dismiss Mosaddegh, an unconstitutional act but a necessary legal pretext to activate the military. However, on the night of August 15, 1953, the first overthrow plan failed miserably when Mosaddegh was warned and his security forces arrested the coup officers right at the Prime Minister's gate. The terrified Shah fled to Rome by private plane, and from CIA headquarters, the order to retreat was sent to Kermit Roosevelt because they believed the operation was completely exposed. But Roosevelt, with the adventurous nature of his family line, ignored that command. He knew he still had unturned trump cards. The following days were a carefully staged drama across the streets of Tehran. The CIA continued to pour in money to organize a huge protest on August 19. This time, they hired people to truly chant the Shah's name, combined with military officers who had been bribed to create a sense that the entire nation was turning its back on the Prime Minister. The military, already confused and divided, finally leaned toward the side with money and power backed by America. The tanks originally deployed to protect the Prime Minister suddenly turned their cannons toward his house. A bloody battle took place right at Mossadegh's residence. The sound of screaming artillery tore at people's hearts and smoke and dust obscured the entire afternoon sky. Finally, to avoid further useless bloodshed of the people, the hero of Iranian independence chose to surrender. Democracy fell at the feet of the oil wells. The aftermath of this event is a picture of stark contrasts. Mosaddegh was brought to a military court, sentenced to solitary confinement, and later lived his final days under house arrest until he passed away in loneliness. The Shah returned to the throne on a red carpet woven with Western support, establishing a military dictatorship that lasted for 25 years, where every opposing voice was silenced by the notorious Savak secret police. But what is the historical lesson here? Operation Ajax may have been a brilliant victory in the CIA's records at the time as they protected the flow of oil, but it was a bitter long-term strategic failure for America itself. By strangling the young seeds of democracy in the Middle East, they inadvertently sowed a seed of deep resentment. It was the resentment accumulated from the 1953 overthrow that exploded into the 1979 Islamic Revolution, turning a strategic ally into an arch-enemy, leading to the shocking hostage crisis and shaping a Middle East full of instability to this day. History always has its way of collecting debts, and quick solutions through violence or covert intervention often leave behind consequences that many generations later still have to endure in pain. What do you think about the actions of the CIA and MI6 in this event? In the tense context of the Cold War, was it a necessary political move to stop communism, or simply a crime against sovereignty and democracy for the pragmatic economic interests of oil corporations? History is not dead pages, it is vibrant and always urges us to reconsider our values. Please leave your thoughts in the comment section below so we can discuss the nature of power and freedom further. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to accompany me in uncovering other secret files, where hidden truths are still waiting to be brought to light. See you in the next dramatic historical stories.